Hi guys, I'm Jim Harper. I'm a detective with Cheyenne PD. I've been a police officer for almost 20 years now. 4 more months, I hit my 20, so I'm close to that. While I've been at the PD, I have been a patrol officer, a bicycle officer. I've been a SWAT officer for 16 years. I've been a detective off and on for 9 years. I've been a firearms instructor for about 12 years. So obviously I'm kind of on the tactical side of it. One of the reasons this class came about was because companies or businesses were asking the SWAT team to come do an active shooter event in their business so that they could train for that. And you may or may not realize, for a SWAT team to come in and actually do an active shooter event takes about 5 days of planning for the SWAT team, when basically all the companies were wanting was, hey, what should our people do if this happens? So then I got tasked, because I've been on the SWAT team so long, to kind of come out and educate the community on what they should do in an active shooter event. Well, starting to look at that, I kind of looked more broadly at the workplace safety itself. And my big thing is, why does it have to get to an active shooter event? You know, why can't we stop it before it gets to that? So I did some research. I had some help with that, some high lethality situations. Did some research into workplace violence, and one of the things that I found is probably about 40% of workplace violence isn't from the workplace. It's actually domestic violence that comes to work. So looking at that, I realized I was a little bit out of my depth, and so I reached out to my partner, Nicole Casey, if you want to come up. Nicole Casey is working with Safe House. She's able to get a lot of statistics. She's able to give me insight into things that I wouldn't know otherwise. We actually think very differently about a lot of things. I'm kind of the tactical, black and white, give me numbers type guy, and she's not. So I'll let her introduce herself now.
Hello, good morning. How are you guys? Good. I am Nicole Casey. I've been with the Safe House for 10 years. I'm the assistant director. I help with a large portion of protection orders and stalking orders, the case planning and safety planning. And I would, like I said, like to talk to Harper said, I've just kind of teamed up to help with the domestic violence portion of the workplace safety.
So we'll go through what I'm planning on doing today. Is the first part is basically, it's not workplace safety. It's more about manipulating people that want to be violent towards you. And I know some people have an issue with the term manipulation, but if you've ever had teenage children, you know that you have been manipulated before, and you have done your best to manipulate them as well. If anybody's been married, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So dealing with people during difficult times is kind of what I term this as, and we'll do that, and that's kind of about manipulation, and then we'll go into some more workplace safety and some habits and things that you can do there. In some of my classes, I also teach a home protection class, and it's really interesting to me, maybe not to you guys because I'm a nerd, but it's really interesting to me to look at environment versus behavior, and what is it that really keeps you safe? Is it your behavior or is it your environment? So we'll do this, and then we'll, do you mind? I think it's gonna keep popping up every time. So this is more about what happens when somebody comes in to the front desk, they're upset, they're angry. And one of the first things that you have to think about, and I'll use them interchangeably, and I think we do in common word usage anyway, is threats versus intimidations. Now, a threat is, I'm going to come over and punch you in the face. Okay, that's all there is. That's a threat. An intimidation, there's a little bit more to that. I'm going to come over and punch you in the face unless you do X, Y, Z. That's something that it's a fine distinction, and we use the words interchangeably. But if you can start recognizing that, that's something that you can use for yourself to go, okay, if he's saying he wants X, Y, Z, even though he's threatening me, X, Y, Z is what I need to focus on, if that makes sense. And one of the examples I use is a bomb threat. We don't all get bomb threats. You guys have to realize, that I come from a different place than most civilians. You know, I go on 4 or 5 bomb threats a year. You guys might hear of one, you know, a school evacuation. So if I'm a guy who's going to make a bomb threat and I'm going to blow up this building, so I call in and say I have set a bomb in this building and I am going to set it off at noon. And there's nothing you guys can do about it, and I'm not going to tell you about it or tell you where it is or anything like that. So you guys are sitting here trying to evaluate that. Now, in what planet, if this is true, if everything I just said is true, I set a bomb in this building, and it's not because I want to blow it up, it's because I want to make the threat. You know, why would, you know, even if I set this bomb last week, and then I start feeling remorse, thinking about all the people that are going to be hurt or disrupted. And so I call up to warn you that this bomb is going to go off. Okay, so now I'm going to warn you, but I'm not going to tell you where it's at. You know, that it just doesn't make sense. You know, the bomb threat, I would say 99.9% of the time, a bomb threat is to get you to do something because of the threat, not because I've actually placed a bomb. And I've actually worked with the bomb squad guys, and bombs aren't as easy to make as we might think. In fact, there's a lot of people over in Arab countries that don't have fingers anymore because they have tried to make bombs and it hasn't worked out real well for them. So, you know, just looking at that and reasoning through it, you realize that most bomb threats, there isn't really a bomb. It's just a threat. So looking at that and seeing if you're being threatened or if you're being intimidated, if you can focus on what they're wanting as opposed to the threat itself. But it's natural for us to go, oh my gosh, he's going to punch me in the face. So when you're assessing the threats, one of the things to realize is people don't just snap. You know, we hear it in the news all the time. In fact, I remember one of the interviews with Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbors, and they're like, he was such a quiet boy. Well, yeah, that's because he's not interacting with the community. I mean, he's not interacting, he's not outgoing, he's kidnapping boys and killing them. So, but those signs are there if they're recognizing it. They don't want to recognize it, they don't want to look. And that's, you know, a lot of times when I talk to people that are victims of crime, in fact, we had one home invasion that I worked in, it was a couple of years ago, one of the first ones in Wyoming that was not drug related that I know of, or in Cheyenne. And the guy said, I don't know, he just broke into my house, he did all these horrible things. And it's like, dude, you know who did this. You just have to think about it. And he did think about it, and he knew exactly who did it. But, you know, and he probably saw the warning signs ahead of time. People don't just snap. There's a series of things that they go through. One of the things that you should also look for is, and this is in fellow employees, dating relationships, whatever, is what is their history? If they have a history of violence, they're more likely to be violent. And I know that some people on the front desk, you have no idea. This is a stranger walking in, that you have no idea if they have a history of violence or not. But if they've been violent in their past, they're more likely to be violent now. Now, there are some signs. I would say that 90% of the people that I know with neck tattoos have a propensity to be violent. You know, if they have jail or prison tats, and everybody knows what a prison tat looks like, it's all one color. It's not the pretty ones that, you know, Popeye the Sailor that's all colored in. It's just green ink and all that. If you see that, I would be going, this guy has a propensity to be violent. The other people that have a propensity to be violent are our military and our law enforcement. When military that's in the news all the time about the PTSD, and it's real. It happens. You know, I've seen it time and time again. The other thing is law enforcement. We are trained to be violent at the drop of a hat. You know, we can go from just talking reasonably to someone to seeing something that we have to take care of and being violent. So, and I know being in a state agency, and I know this is the old DCI building, but how do you guys have a lot of contact with law enforcement in your jobs? Okay. Well, some of you do, some of you don't. But just realize, most law enforcement, I mean, we're good. We don't do anything. But when we snap, we're terrible. And we all know some of the cases that I'm talking about. When we snap, it's not pretty. It's embarrassing for me. Be aware of when people are pushing themselves to be violent. If I come up to you, and if I come up to Nicole and I say, you know, if you don't, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you. You know, I'm talking myself into it. So be aware if they're repeating that, you know, they might be trying to get you to back down, but be aware that they're pushing themselves into it. A lot of people feel like they're pushed into violence, and we'll talk more about that later too, with more threat assessment. So be aware of those kind of signs. And we all have had the experience where you know something's about to get violent. Yes, that when, you know, clenching the fist, doing this type thing, it's about ready to get going. So watch for those signs as well. Some people are just crazy, and it's true. They're just nuts, and you can't. They are less predictable. Hopefully, you guys don't have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. You know, as street officers, we do. There's that guy that walks around downtown all the time that's going, wah, wah. We get calls on him all the time. Now, he's just nuts. Now, he could be violent. I don't think we've ever had to like tase him or anything like that, because actually we're sick, and so we start teasing him a little bit. And you know, he has some sort of obsession with Jane Fonda. He thinks Jane Fonda is trying to kidnap him. And so if he has the pet, you know, he sees her or someone like her, or she's getting the force towards him, he puts the force back and goes, and yeah, it's, you know, trying to keep Jane Fonda away. And I really don't blame him. I don't like her that much either. But there's actually a story of a police officer that he was in the lobby complaining about Jane Fonda stalking him, and how and the officer's going, "Can you show me how you do that?" And he goes, "Ugh." and the police officer says, "Was it like this?" No, it was more like, ugh. And so, you know, we actually end up having fun with it rather than tasing him and throwing him on the ground, making him all bloody, which is good. It's good entertainment, but it's also good for him too. Be aware, drugs and alcohol. There are a lot of times, and I've been married for 19 years. There have been times I have been tempted to smack my wife upside the head. You know, and I think anybody that's been married for any length of time, that temptation is there. You know, if there were drugs and alcohol on board, that's more likely to happen. You know, if you have kids, you know, once you have kids, you may not abuse your child, but you have a little bit more understanding for people that do. Maybe not to the extent that we see, especially in the bit high-profile cases, but we understand a little bit more. If drugs and alcohol are on board, that's more likely to happen. So as you interact with these people, especially if they're giving you little vibes or something, if you can smell alcohol, if you notice that they're tweaker skinny, sores on their face, that kind of stuff, probably time to be alert that things could get violent very quickly. And speaking of meth users are somewhat unpredictable. I mean, they give signs, but they're a roller coaster. And I don't know at what, the ones I've been dealing with, I don't know at what phase they're in, whether they just injected, whether they injected two hours ago, whether it's been 10 hours, but it goes from, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I want to kill you. Yeah, and it's a roller coaster. So be aware of that. The other thing that you should think about is saving face. I have dealt with people one-on-one, and they are kind, they're considerate, they say yes sir, no sir. I get them out in front of their gangbanger buddies, and then I am nothing but I'm the man that's trying to keep them down, and I'm being polite. So be aware, if there's someone that you're dealing with and there's a crowd of their Confederates, they may feel like they're pushed into being violent just so that they can show off for their friends. So that makes things a little bit more tense.
And if it involves domestic violence and you have like the abuser trying to come and talk to the person, they're going to be extremely kind and nice until you tell them that they can't do what they want to do. So they shift quickly too, and you need to be cautious. You need to always position yourself before telling them no or whatever, because they will go from the nicest, kindest person to really upset and aggressive just like that. Once that kindness doesn't benefit them at all.
And you can prepare yourself subtly without aggravating the circumstance. You know, if I'm going to give Nicole bad news, I don't have to go, okay, Nicole, you're not going to get what you want.
Right.
But, you know, which would probably aggravate the situation. But I can prepare myself by just standing there, keeping my hands in front of me. And that's one of the cop tricks we always have is if I'm talking to somebody that scares me, and Nicole does, you know, I keep I keep my hands up in front of me as I'm talking. And so if she's going to throw something or throw a punch or something like that, at least I can get them in front of my face, and I might have a chance to not have a one knockout punch. So there is the good news about being threatened is that you're not being assaulted yet. If you know, like, and of course I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I use that as an example. You know, and even when she was younger, it's like, use your words, use your words. This is something good. If they're threatening you, they're using their words. That is giving you something to work with. Once they decide to stop using their words, then that's when the assaults take place. So if they're using their words, you want that to happen. No matter, you know, even if they're calling you bad names and everything in the book, you want those words to come out. You want them to keep talking. For a couple reasons, and I'll go into it now. Number one, it takes energy to be angry. Nobody can be angry all the time. It's just too exhausting. So if it's letting them vent, you know, it's letting them get it out. So it's helping to de-escalate the situation. And so that's a really good thing.
The longer you keep them in that talking phase, the more you can be doing to get yourself safe. Calling under with your phone, dialing somebody, or getting yourself positioned to a safe spot. So even if they're really aggressive and talking, at least if you're actively listening, you have that window of opportunity to try to get yourself positioned to a more safe position.
And the other thing, if you're thinking about that, you know, hey, they're using their words, I've got time, I want to do that, then you're actually thinking and you're not looking threatened. If you look threatened, then that's going to be an encouragement to them. I mean, if Nicole's yelling at me and I'm going, okay, then it's going to be an encouragement. She's starting to get what she wants.
They're feeding into that.
All right. What happens before people get violent? First, nobody likes to think that they're a bad guy. Nobody here likes to think, hey, I like to kick puppies and beat children. You know, we just don't think that way. However, we justify ourselves. That puppy had piddled on the floor, so I needed to kick it. You know, that 14-year-old daughter talked back to me, so she needed a smack. So, you know, the first thing that they do is they justify what they're doing. And that's huge because nobody wants to think they're bad. And in fact, that's one of the interview techniques that I use when I'm talking to people who have done bad crimes. The guy that did the home invasion, it's like, what would make a normal, rational person do this? I'm sure that something happened, and so he pulled it out that this guy had called him a bad name in front of his family. And so, sure enough, he was going to go break into his house and carve a letter in his forehead. So, you know, and it's really far out there, but they feel justified. So before somebody's going to be violent, unless they're completely insane, like the guy that was scared of Jane Fonda, they're going to feel justified about it. So look at that. That's one of the tie-ins that you can look at if somebody's yelling at you or something like that. Why do they feel justified? And it usually, and this is something I've been exploring a little bit, and I'm not sure how I'm not going to put this out there 100%, but usually it's because some sort of loss, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's loss of money, whether it's the loss of the spouse, loss of control, loss of self-esteem. These are little things that you can look at. I think almost every time they feel justified, it's because of some sort of loss. And I called it grief initially, but I think that might be misleading. So I think as somebody's being angry and expressing that to you, start thinking, okay, what did they lose? And because this will give you a huge tie-in. This will give you a lot of ways to de-escalate the situation just verbally without having to beat them up. Okay, so first off, they feel justified before they get violent. Second, they don't feel like they have many alternatives. They feel like violence is the best alternative, if that makes sense. So the way to combat that is give them more alternatives. Now, yeah, okay, that's the other part. So give them more alternatives. And Nicole addresses it a little differently, but if somebody's coming into you and saying, and thinking that they need to be violent to get what they want, if you can deflect them and go, okay, well, what if you did this, this, and this? And I know that I've talked to social workers before, they're taking kids away from families. And so they go in and say, okay, we're going to take your kids away today. But what you can do is you can start an anger management program. You can start going to AA. You can start doing this. You can clean the house. And then after you guys do that kind of stuff, then you can very well get your kids back, because the state sucks at raising children. So giving them those other alternatives, rather than when I say, or the social worker says, I'm going to take your kids away, and the perpetrator is going, my best bet is to beat her up, take my kids, and leave the state. You know, you're giving them another alternative.
You can almost always win over any conversation that's going to have a bad effect by keeping in mind 2 positives to 1 negative. If you're going to have to fire somebody, if you're going to have to give them bad news, try to start off with 1 or 2 positive things and then transfer into that negative topic. So that way they feel like they have some kind of hope, and you're not just, oh, you're fired, good luck, there's plenty of places out there. But you know, if you can talk about some positive stuff, lift them up a little bit, and then it's not such a hard fall when you bring that negative conversation on. It's all about just being prepared when you feel safe and still putting yourself in a position before you get to a bad spot.
And that's one of the things I look at, and even in dating relationships, if I was to, and Nicole and I are not dating, she's just, the way I instruct is I give examples. So if I go to Nicole and say, hey, I'm sorry it's not working out between us, but you're a wonderful person, you're a wonderful mother, and I'm sure there's a man out there that's just right for you. Have you checked on eHarmony yet? You know.
Nope.
Right. So already I'm getting her diverted away from the fact that we're breaking up and looking at other options, which is what you want her to do. You do not want her stalking you for the next, or me for the next 3 months. So give them other alternatives.
Everything that we say about today is always trying to get yourself trained in those good habits before you end up in a bad situation. So every aspect of today, it's just planning for the future. If you keep your keys in your pocket at all times when you go to your car, even when you feel safe, that one bad situation you find yourself in, you're going to have your keys in your pocket, not in your big, deep purse. So everything we're saying is just planning ahead, training your brain to do it naturally before you need to, because once you need to, you're going to forget.
Because I would much rather you guys prevent a crime, and I talk about this in the home protection class. It's like, I'd much rather you guys don't get burglarized. You know, number one, it's better for you. And number two, I'm a property crimes guy. If you guys don't have burglaries, I get to sit back and go fishing.
More time for presentation.
Exactly. So first, they feel justified. Second, they feel like they have shrinking alternatives. Third, they feel like they have positive outcomes. Now, I know this sounds weird, that me going to Nicole's workplace, shooting her in the head, and then being arrested by the police department is a positive for me. You know, spending the rest of my life in jail on death row, yeah, is that a positive for me? Well, it might be. If my big concern is that she's getting away from me and she's going to be with somebody else and I don't have that control anymore and I can't control her any other way, yeah, that's positive. I just won.
And you're probably not thinking about that long term. You're thinking right now, nobody else gets to be with me. So they aren't thinking about that whole rational. They're just focusing on what they want out of the situation.
At the moment.
At the moment, short term.
And this is a technique I use in a lot of my interviews. And of course, I'm interviewing suspects, and none of them want to confess and things like that. And a lot of them, it's drug related, that they have a drug problem. So, you know, when I talk to them, it's like, okay, you're looking at the short term instead of the long term. Yes, you probably do need to go to jail. Yes, you do need to go into rehab. And if you do, then you can make a better life for yourself a year from now. You can have a great life for the next 60 years, but all you're focusing on right now is the next 5 months. So trying to get them to focus outward, the long term instead of the short term, that's huge if you can do that. And honestly, I know you guys are from all different walks of work, so I don't know how much time you have to interact with people. But if you have time, this is a good thing to get them focusing further out. The last thing is, do they have the ability? So if they feel like they're justified, they don't have the any alternatives, it'll be a positive outcome. The next thing to look at is, do they have the ability? And that's kind of where I go back to the Mad Bomber. You know, there's not a lot of people in the United States that actually know how to build a bomb. So, you know, looking at, do they have the ability? And if it's this, you know, 5'3", 90-year-old woman that's threatened to kick your butt, you know, you got to look at that. It's probably not going to happen, except to Nicole.
Yes, that is my MO. The only people that ever try to hit me are little old ladies that are mad at me.
And, you know, I would say, take it at face that they have the face value, that they have the ability, because that'll keep you safer. But if it's obvious that they don't, and we did that, you know, we had one guy in a wheelchair and kind of a transient guy that, you know, he would make a lot of comments like that. And it's like, dude, I could just walk around behind you. You're not gonna beat me up, and so you don't get excited about it. All right, everybody ready for a story about Frontier Days? It's a little bathroom humor. But it sums up and I call it JACA. It sums up the justified, the shrinking alternatives, the positive outcomes, and the ability. Two guys there's a cowboy at Frontier Days, little snookered. He goes into the bathroom where there's 12 urinals. There is a obviously homosexual man that walks in the bathroom after him. This homosexual man has a friend that's a wrestling coach. So the obviously homosexual man goes up to the cowboy goes up next to the cowboy who's urinating and gets right next to him. You can imagine that there was some tension there. Rather than using any of the other 10 stalls that were available, he goes right next to the cowboy. So the cowboy makes a comment about that, and I'm sure it was not positive, and then starts to walk out. Well, the wrestling coach, who's been standing over by the sink, says, "You can't treat my friend like that." So does the wrestling coach feel like he's justified to use violence? Absolutely. This guy just insulted his friend. Does he feel like he has shrinking alternatives? Yeah. The cowboy's starting to walk out. And, you know, if at that point the cowboy had said, you know, you're right, I didn't realize how insensitive I am. I should take a class on being more sensitive to other people of other sexual orientations. I'll get signed up for that, and let me go apologize to your friend. You know, could that have cut that right in the middle? Yes, but we all know here it was never going to happen. So shrinking alternatives. Then would there be a positive outcome? Absolutely. If this wrestling coach beats up the cowboy, he'll learn his lesson, right? And did he have the ability? Well, he thought he did. This cowboy was a little tougher and a little less drunk than the wrestling coach. So, and I can go through it again on the other side with the cowboy. He felt justified. He felt like he had shrinking alternatives. He felt like he had had positive outcomes, and he had the ability. So, you know, this works even with two drunks at Frontier Days, if you actually look at it. As you are in your professions, whatever you're at, wherever you're at, I don't know who said it first. My wife says it comes from Oprah Winfrey. I'll take her word for it. But you teach people how to treat you. You have to set good boundaries. And if you don't like being called a certain name, and somebody comes into the front desk and they say, "Hey, look, you B, you need to get this person on the line," and, you know, you can set those boundaries right then. You can say, "All right, I am going to work with you, but we're not going to have that kind of language." And I do that all the time, taking complaints from people. It's like, okay, we can have a discussion, but you're not going to get upset. You're not going to call me names. You're not going to call my officer names. You know, so you have to set good boundaries. And what they are is dependent upon the situation and you. Sometimes it's okay. I mean, if you know it's just somebody that's venting and they're just trying to get stuff out and it's not directed at you, you know, if they're complaining about their wife who's a B, that's a little different. So, but if it's directed at you, you have to set your own boundaries and teach people how to treat you. Okay.
I think you covered that.
All right. Things to do when you're threatened. I'm glad you like that. There's a reason I do it this way. First, keep calm. Like I said, if somebody's threatening you and you're shrinking away from them, then it adds fuel to the fire. It makes them want to be more aggressive and more threatening and more assertive. Number two, don't threaten back. And I like saying you can explain rational consequences, but don't threaten back. Once you get to a certain level, if you threaten back, it's just going to be back and forth, and it's going to exacerbate the situation. It's not the de-escalation that we're looking for. It's going to exacerbate it. Now, you can talk about natural consequences. Nicole, if you hit me, I'm going to call the police. They're going to come investigate it, and you're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking to a cop who you probably don't want to talk to. That's rational. That's a rational discussion. If I say, Nicole, if you hit me, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. That's stupid. She doesn't believe that. I don't believe that. It's just a threat, and they know it. If you can talk rationally, first off, don't threaten back. Second, talk about natural and rational consequences. Then it might actually make them go, okay, what am I trying to achieve here? I'm not trying to achieve slapping Harper upside the face and talking to a cop for the next 20 minutes. What I'm trying to achieve is X, Y, or Z. And the other thing is give them other options to violence, and that's kind of what I'm talking about there. Is if you're listening and keying into what Nicole's mad about, then you can start working on that and giving them other options as well.
If you give them, most times they're just upset. They don't necessarily always know what they need to accomplish. They just know that they're really upset and they want to take it out on somebody. So if you can actively listen to them, really ask them questions about what they're talking about. Talk with them, have that conversation when you're safe, and you can give them the opportunity to talk, have dialect about what they're upset about. And then if they don't know and they're kind of talking in circles, because most people that are really upset, when they get to me, they're talking in circles. They just don't know. They just want to scream. Give them some kind of goal. If you're listening to them and you can create something. So if somebody comes in and they're screaming because they didn't get their protection order, and it's all my fault, even though I'm not the judge and I didn't get to pick, then I can just pick something else out and say, you know what, you didn't get your protection order, and it's going to be okay because it turns out law enforcement gets there just as fast. And now we can actually go and try to get some legal help for custody and divorce, and it's going to show really well that you stood up there all by yourself and you were really strong. So I can kind of pick out something that gives them something to look forward to and really shift that conversation around.
There's only one mic, so every time you talk, I have to get really close to you.
Oh, you made me a little nervous.
Did you see her? She was getting kind of...
I know, right?
All right. I'm middle-aged. So my mother is older than I am, obviously. And I went to back home. I'm originally from Oklahoma, and I was around the house. It was around the holidays. And she was trying to open a jar of pickles. And she couldn't get the jar of pickles open. And I said, oh, hey, Mom, that's no problem. I'll get that for you. So I reach over, and I start to open the jar of pickles, and she says, leave that alone! I can't believe you were going to do that. And I was somewhat taken aback. Because why would anyone get mad at somebody else trying to help them open a jar of pickles? And if I had let it only be about the jar of pickles, I would have been, Mom, why are you yelling at me? You're such a meanie. I'm going to stomp off to my room like I did when I was a teenager. But it really wasn't about the jar of pickles. It was about the fact that Dad passed about 4 years ago. She's living on her own. She doesn't feel like she has control as much anymore. And if she can't get a jar of pickles open by herself, she's feeling pretty helpless. So it had nothing to do with the pickles. It really didn't. It had to do with her feelings of loss of control of her life and feeling helpless. And just like Nicole was talking about, talking in circles, a lot of times we do that. We focus on this stuff instead of focusing on what's important. Usually people are angry because there's an emotional tie in there. They're not angry about the pickles. they're angry about something that's going on emotionally with them. And if you can key into that, you can de-escalate this. And it's kind of tough to do because your first reaction is open your own damn pickles, right? Rather than taking a step back and going, what is going on and how do I deal with this? So angry people, there's usually an emotional tie, and if you can find that, that's a good deal.
And I think that you bring up a really good point. You have to remember that this is an emotional topic for them. So don't let their frustration and their anger trigger any emotions in you, because two emotional people never come out to a positive outcome. So really, really remember, no matter how offended and upset they're making you, this is about their emotional time, and so don't let it offend you. Just try to figure out what is upsetting them and be as vague as possible when trying to label it, because if you get it wrong, it just escalates them more.
Dad always used to say, have you ever tried to win an argument with your dog? It's the same thing about trying to win an argument with angry people. I mean, mentally, they're just working on an emotional level, not a rational level, and it is trying to win an argument with your dog. You're not going to win. So if this is a ticking time bomb, how do we defuse it? Obviously, I have some tools like taser, a gun, an asp, bunches of buddies that like to dogpile people, that when somebody looks like they're about to get violent, we can take care of that. I don't assume that everybody here carries tasers and pepper spray. So really the only tools that you guys have is talking and listening. And I would say listening is much more important than talking. Well, that was too far. For the reasons I went over earlier. They can't be angry all the time. If you allow them to vent, it allows you to set those boundaries so that they know how to treat you. Just listening, and it gives you those little clues, like tying in the emotional ties. You know, what is actually going on there? Why do they feel justified? Why do they feel justified about being angry? So listening is huge. And clarifying it, or talking is good too, but it should be, you shouldn't be the one doing all the talking. If you're the one doing all the talking, then their problem is not being resolved. And basically, they're not going to come in and approach you and be very angry if they just won the lottery, right? I mean, if things are going good for them, if they don't have any problems, then they're not going to be angry with you. So when you talk, be sure that you're listening and you clarify. You can clarify the problem all day long. You can say, okay, is it about the jar of pickles, or is it because of your hand strength, or is it because you're living alone now? You know, you can start clarifying. Acknowledge their anger. That's huge. And as long as you're acknowledging it, you know, you can say that, and that won't escalate it. You can say, I understand that you're angry. I understand why you would be angry. You can empathize with them, which is understanding them. Be direct. Apologies are one thing. I know people who say, I never apologize. You know, if it's not my fault, I don't apologize. I apologize all the time, you know, and even if it's not my fault, you know, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry that you're in this situation. You know, it's just being empathetic, and it's putting you on their team. And if you can be on their team, then they're less likely to beat you up, right? So I like apologies when they're sincere. And you know, if you can emotionally if they can see that you're sincere, it's huge.
And sometimes the opportunity that somebody can just take responsibility. I, 9 times out of 10 at work, take responsibility for something that I didn't do, just because a lot of times they want to hear, I am sorry, I should have tried harder, let me know what I can do. Please educate me on how I can fix this. Let's go, we're a team now. So I never have a problem at all apologizing for something that I had absolutely nothing to do with, just because it makes them feel like they've been heard, I'm going to work harder, and now we're a team again. So.
And I know, because I've been married for 19 years and I have a teenage daughter, that when they say you're not listening to me, that is a huge clue. And you may be listening to them, but you're not cluing into what the real problem is. So if somebody, as you're listening, if somebody says you're not listening to me, and you've been talking for a little bit, and maybe you're still talking about the pickles. If mom says you're not listening to me, it's because I'm not. I'm not looking at those underlying emotional tools, and I need to, or emotional ties, and I need to work harder at that. So if somebody says you're not listening, let that be a big red flag that maybe you need to take a deep breath, step back, and go, all right, let me try again. So,
and then change your tactic at that point. If you were asking a bunch of questions saying, I don't understand, can you clarify? That's maybe a time to say, oh, okay, and then really not try to figure it out as much, but try to go towards the plan of how to make them feel better, or a goal to work towards or something. Because sometimes clarifying is good, but it can also really frustrate them if they feel like you're asking again and again and you're just not getting it. So you have to realize if what isn't working, just shift. You don't have to understand, just keep trying until something does work for you when you're in that safe moment that you can talk.
and again, like she said, you're in that safe moment. You're just talking right now. It might be stressful for you, but you're not getting beat up, and that's a plus. We like that. All right, one of the techniques that I like, when I go home and my wife comes up to me and says, "Do you know what your dog did today?" Am I automatically on the defensive? Yes. We've both owned these dogs for 6, 7 years now. But when she says, "Do you know what your dog did today?" I'm automatically on the defensive. I am automatically escalating. Um, you know, we used to talk about how not to be accusatory, not to say, you made me feel this way, but instead say, what you did, or no, I feel this way after you did that, which is taking more of the responsibility on me. And that's good. But I think the best is saying we. I call it forced bonding. If somebody comes in and they're unhappy about a situation, and I say, "Nicole, we can work this out. Why don't we get together and we'll do this and we'll do that? We can work this out together." And that's huge if I have to go, "Nicole, I want to help you with this. We can work this out. But you're yelling and screaming, calling me names is not helping. So let's think about what we really want to accomplish." If she thinks I'm on her team, then she's not going to beat me up, and that's a good thing. So force bonding is huge, just saying we instead of you. And that's really hard. And actually at the end, Nicole has some advice for you guys.
I better remember what that is before we get to the end of this.
These other things go hand in hand. And I use this in my interview techniques. I say you can either be thing one or thing two. And be aware of this in public as well, because people will do this to you. In my interviews, and I only use my powers for good, I'll say, are you the type of person that doesn't care about anybody else and needs to go to prison for a long time? Or are you the guy that just made a mistake and, just wasn't thinking at that time and made a mistake and feels sorry about it? Well, obviously he wants to be this guy. So then I say, well, the way I can tell between these two things is the person who tells the truth. If the guy who did this and feels sorry about it and wants to change his life, he's going to tell me really what happened and why he did it, and then I can understand. So that's thing one or thing two. Now you can use that as well on people. Are you the person who just wants to come in here and yell and be mean and scream and angry, or are you somebody that wants to resolve this situation? Because if you want to resolve this situation, then if you're that type of person, then these are the steps that we need to do. First, we need to lower our voices. Stop calling me the B word. All those things. So thing one and thing two is very handy, I think. Also, be aware of this out on the street. Manipulators use this. If I say, "Hey, do you want to go out and get a cup of coffee after this?" Or are you just one of those stuck-up bees that is too good to go out with a cop? Automatically, I'm thing one or thing two. Either she goes to have a cup of coffee with me, or she's a stuck-up bee that's too good to go out with a cop. So already I'm putting pressure on her. If that happens in real life, be aware of that. I mean, you can still go have coffee with him if you want, but that's not how I would want to approach a first date, as being threatened into it. The other thing is, it kind of goes along with thing one and thing two, but the other thing is projection. Nicole, I know you're a good mother, and you want to be a good mother. And so these are some of the things that we need to look at. If you project, hey, you're a good mother, and a good mother wouldn't act this way, she would act this way, then you're projecting what behavior she needs to have in front of you. And that works, you know, that works not only with the mother, it works with the shrinking alternatives type thing. You know, I know you're a good mother, I know you want to get your kids back. These are the things that you need to, and I say you, but that we need to work on so that you can get your kids back. So projection is huge. The other thing is deflection. If some, and I don't have a slide for it because I haven't put it in there yet. If somebody comes in and say Nicole's the secretary and I'm getting angry with her, and I saw this at driver services. I just went up to get my license renewed, and this one lady comes into the clerk, and she's like, "I don't understand why I have to have so many forms of ID when I come up here. Why the heck should I have to do this? You know, here's my birth certificate, here's my," and she didn't have a marriage certificate, I think is what it was. And she's like, "I don't know, you know, here's my driver's license now, and I don't know why I have to have a marriage certificate." And the gal says, "Well, Homeland Security wants to know why you were born with this name and why you have this name now." Automatically deflects it to this big government agency that this lady's never going to complain to. You know, so she's saying it's not about me. You know, they're not my rules. It's Homeland Security. Best thing of deflection I have ever seen. It was great. And the lady calmed down because who's going to fight Homeland Security, right? So deflection is huge if you can do it. The other thing is I always like to request, don't order. You know, if somebody comes in and they're being angry, don't say, "You're going to sit down and shut up until I get ready for you," all right? That is not going to help the situation. If you can say, "Okay, if you can sit down for a few minutes, let me get a few things ready, I'll be with you in a minute." You know, requests always work better because if you order people, they're immediately, their backs get up. And the big thing is, don't lose your focus. I know that people are in there, they're yelling at you, they're screaming at you, they're angry, you feel threatened, but don't lose your focus. And whatever your focus is, I mean, obviously your focus is you don't want to get beat up. The other part is you want to help resolve the situation. So don't lose your focus. Now, what Nicole was going to tell you, and I'll start out with, is some of these techniques might not be normal for you. It might not be something that you do day to day. So the time to practice these techniques is not when there's somebody in your face screaming and threatening you, because you're going to be going, "I know there was something I was supposed to do." I would encourage you, and your spouses and children are going to hate me for this, I would encourage you to go home and try some of these techniques on your family, you know, with your kids, stuff like that, so that it does feel natural, so that when this person is in front of you screaming at you and threatening you, that you have something in your toolbox that you've used before. You know, if you use the we thing, you know, on my wife, if I go home and say, she says, you know, the dishes aren't done, the carpets and the dogs did this. It's like, well, we can work on this together. Why don't we do dishes, and you know, why don't we choose who does dishes, and you know, that kind of thing. If you can do that, just one, you know, a little bit in day-to-day life when you're not under stress, that it will probably help you out when you are under stress.
So, even safety planning. I'm not sure, do all of you guys work in offices? Are you in the field? Is it both? Who's in office where people come to see you? And then a couple of you guys go out into the field. So basically what you guys want to start preparing yourself is when you're leaving work, when you're going out into the field, when people are coming to talk to you, you need to start having those safety planning practices in your head, having a normal routine. If you can make it habit, when you aren't in danger, like I said earlier, it's going to come natural. So women, cell phone in one pocket, keys in the other. Do not put them in your purses. It's hard to find it in a normal situation, but if you are freaked out, they are nowhere to be found. So I always have one in each pocket. That way, if I'm heading out, I look around, look under my car as I'm approaching it, kind of in the back seat. That's my normal behavior. And then have the keys handy or the cell phone handy if I were to have a problem. When I'm parking, if I'm going out into the field, I'm never ever parking in a driveway. I'm always parking facing maybe on, like if I can catch the corner so I can just get in the car and drive off, or at least somewhere where I know that I've positioned myself that I can just get in and get out of there pretty quickly. When I come into a room, I am always talking to somebody, so I have the door by me. So I'm not ever going to pick that middle row, middle seat, because I'm going to want to be able to get out of here easily. When I go to restaurants, I always still sit and position myself by the door. Not because I think I'm in a lot of danger, but it just comes naturally, because then when a client comes in and visits with me in my little office, I am always thinking, okay, is it going to be quicker to get out the door or out my back window that's really huge? So it's the general things you can do on a daily basis that it's just going to come natural. If you're visiting with somebody out in the field, you don't want to do that in their kitchen. You don't want to do it, you wouldn't do it in their bathroom, but you don't want to have situations in a restroom, because that's tile floors usually. If you get knocked down, it's going to be worse if you hit your head. There's sharp objects in the kitchen. When you're going in to speak with somebody in the home, try to do it in the living room. Look around for the exits. It seems like common sense, but the more you can practice doing those little things, the better. Like Detective Harper said, those conversations can be really, really fun in a safe situation. So if you're talking to somebody who's just kind of fluctuating a little bit, it's kind of neat to test your skills out and give them an opportunity to have a goal to look for. Or if you know that you're going to have to let somebody down easily, it's kind of, and you're safe, it's kind of fun to start practicing giving them positives to go with a negative, and walking away from that situation in a normal situation thinking, man, that wasn't an intimidating situation by any means, but I handled that so much better than I usually would, just because I used different practices. Is there anything else you can think of?
Not that we're not going to cover under workplace safety.
All right.
So, guys, I need a drink because I talk way too much. So if we want to take 5 and come back,
Yeah.
that'll work.
Yep.